me show you how to be a good breezy and change your predictions.
Yeah, and so on the last points you made, basically on how to use Gen AI products in general to augment productivity, you had lately a very good episode that I'll put in the show notes. I don't remember the name of the guest, I always forget it, but I talked to you about that on WhatsApp. Yes, Sully Omar. That's the episode with Sully Omar. I'll put that in the show notes. I have the link here. I think this episode is great because you guys lay out the state of the like the state of AI, and also how Sully is using that himself in his work. That was interesting because that was resonating with a lot of my personal experience, where most of the time it will get me the first 80 to 95%, and then I'll need to take back control and basically knock that out of the park. But that's amazing because like that allows me to ship things much faster than I used to be able to, because before I had to do everything almost from scratch, whereas now there is a lot of repetitive aspect, or like low intellectual value at the very, very beginning, or mostly in the middle actually of modeling work, that you can just automate with these products, and then you'll knock that out of the park, which is great. But I found an interesting point in your episode with Sully was that it's actually very good if you are an expert on what you're using already. And so mostly if you're senior in one dimension of your work, that's going to be awesome, because that's going to give you the Iron Man suit package, basically, that you were talking about. The problem is when you're very junior and you're fresh in all the dimensions, then it can be harder. And probably my advice here would be get really good at some dimension of what you're doing, and then you'll use these tools to get even better. But you need to get very good at some dimension so that you're attractive to a business in the first place. And so I think it's also a good place for us to transition here, where like I'm also curious to hear what your thoughts are. For instance, if people in my audience, they are working in companies where either AI is arriving, so that means either they are using like off-the-shelf tools, like they get access to Cloud Code, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, whatever. They need to be able to use that internally, or they need to come up with their own fine-tuned LLMs, or they really like these new models, this new way of doing things, and they want to get into the core of the reactor, and so get a work at Google, at OpenAI, things like that. What would you recommend to these people in my audience that they do from an HR advice perspective, which is a hat you've worn during a lot of years?
Oh, great question. And to like reframe of like if they wanted to get into a top tier firm to work on either training models or work at Google and become a product manager and deploy these type of systems.
Yeah. Let's start with that, and then I think there is an interesting question that is going to be, what if they want to stay in their company but augment the work with these new tools? But I think it's kind of two different use cases. So let's focus on the first one you just talked about, and then we'll dive into the other one.
Excellent. So great question. So getting into these top tier firms, these companies get a ridiculous amount of media attention and applications coming in, and so it's kind of like trying to get into Harvard or Stanford or something like that. Everyone wants in. Now, the first tip I have for folks is you might have the rare bird who applies directly in the front door and goes through the screening process and goes through sourcers, and a recruiter sees their resume and he gets plucked out and has a conversation, goes to a hiring manager, goes through interviews to get a job. There's rare birds who get that. Most mortals, the way they get in is they know someone who works there and they say, hey, can you look at my resume? or sorry, hey, can you refer me to this job here? And here's a link to it. And that increases the odds, at least, that you're going to skip some of the steps of going through a sourcer, or at least it forces the recruiter to actually look at the resume that's sent to them, and your person that you've asked for a referral, if they know you well and you've worked with them, they can write a nice little note saying, I worked with this person for X, Y, and Z. You should really consider looking at them. And that will put you in the front of the line. Doesn't guarantee you'll get a job there, but definitely helps. Now, that's for just, rank and file. I want to work in engineering and product. I'm not building AI models or doing anything super bleeding edge. Skills that are well known and seen in medium-sized companies and small companies, which is relatively would be easier to get into. Then the next thing, which is AI research. There's only so many people who can be in that sphere, and I met some people who were elite in that area, who were AI researchers at Google and Facebook, and they even have trouble getting into the right jobs in other organizations or top-tier startups like OpenAI right now, because there's only so many people who can work at such a level, have the track record, and have the ability to do so. I will say, though, if you want to get referred into jobs at Google, Facebook, the rest of these larger tech companies that are more standard roles, it always helps that when you go for the referral, send that LinkedIn message, but have it set up so easily that the person that you're asking to refer you, all they have to do is Control-C, Control-V, and get the referral into their company's internal HR database. If you let's get a coffee chat and blah, 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 and be around the bush, no, it's like catch up. You're wasting that person's time. It's best to just go straight for the heart of the matter and here, this is what, help you doing well, this is what I'm looking for. If you can, I'm looking for this role. Can you copy and paste this message you can send to the recruiter? Here's my resume in a link form, not a PDF, so they don't have to upload anything. They can just put the link in wherever, and the person can click it and see your resume. And then also, I'm putting my name and my email, my phone number, and my area code or my time zone. Just make it as easy as possible for them to get into the applicant tracking system. Those are things that are very little, but it means a lot because the person on the receiving end is constantly getting these types of requests, and a lot of people don't know how to actually formulate their thoughts properly or actually communicate properly. And I've been on the receiving end of this a lot, and I love helping people, but sometimes it's like, what do you want me to do here for you? I'm confused, and you have my attention, now you're wasting it. Whereas an assassin like salesperson or a top tier referral, that's exactly what you need to see to get through there. Now, regarding your other, and another thing is, even if you get into these interviews, these jobs, there's always these different boot camps and things like that. I don't want to get into that. What I will say is, if you've gotten into a phase of recruiters said, let's get a phone call going, or a hiring manager wants to do a phone screen, it's basically them saying to you, implicitly, you have all the qualifications to get this job. And the rest of it is, once you go through an interview loop, are you going to say something stupid or just completely have your head explode, which leads them giving a reason of not giving you a job. So, and also, there's an aspect of, is randomness to interview process. We like to act like there's a science of interviewing. We actually had a team at Google who would just go through people who were not given offers or rejected and really dig into the feedback and say, you know what, actually this person has a very awesome track record. Maybe there's something we did, or there's having a bad day, and get the right interviewers in there. People would come back, get a job from Google, and then they would track their performance compared to people who originally got accepted, and the people who originally were rejected ended up outperforming the people that we originally thought were good, which then showed to us, actually, this whole interview thing is, if anything, like performative work, or maybe at best making sure we don't have a complete fraud or axe murderer in there. What really matters is what is your track record and what have you done in the past, and maybe who's vetting you. That's why. And go ahead and jump in. I could ramble on more for it.
Yeah. No, I think. So, and you'll continue for sure on these train of thoughts, but. Yeah, just wanted to say first, thanks. I think it's super valuable and actionable to hear you say that for people, because, as a candidate, you can get completely lost in all these applications and these processes, and so knowing how it works from the inside, what people like you inside are looking for, is extremely valuable, because. It makes the candidates not waste time, both for the recruiter and for themselves, which is very important. And I am also super impressed that you guys did that at Google. This is great. I think it's a great signal from a company to be able to look into what they've done, who they rejected, and then be able to say, actually we didn't have a really good legitimate reason to reject that person. Let's reach out to them again.
Right.
I've never heard of that, and that's amazing.
Yeah, and it was great because Google. I mean, every company goes through like a golden age, and you only know about you're at a golden age in your life or at a company until it passes. Because you start looking at it and say, oh wow, like I was in a really good time, but at the time I was so focused on minutia that I didn't realize I was in a golden age. We might look at this path in this last 10, 15 years in stock market returns as like a golden age where it was like you just invested in anything that had cash flow and you were winning. And then we might go through what my great grandpa and grandpa went through, a depression where I was like 20 some odd years, 30 years, the stock market was just nothing. And then we'll look back and be like, oh man, we got it really good. And so that was a golden age of Google where you had a lot of people who were just didn't have egos, didn't think they're captive industry. They understood the culture of what Google is just a gigantic experiment on that page. We're running all these experiments. We don't know the answers. We're going to see what fits and go from there. And so why don't we run our company the same way? And we're doing that for interviews. Now, another thing is I was in M&A, mergers and acquisitions. I didn't go deep enough into that, but I would have situations where we have a team of 300 engineers and product managers, top tier people, genius people, working on a certain product and it wasn't working. And the VP would say, hey, Jordan and team, go out there and find a company that's doing this better. And we would bring in a 5-person team of like these people who had like just random backgrounds, some didn't go to college or whatnot. And they built a product that was just cracked, that was just like crushing it for barely any payroll. And they had the market. And we would then bring them in for interviews. Like they would want to do the deal and we had to do interviews, make sure you're good. And I would have to sit with just like these people. Did you ever play Warhammer 40K at all by any chance? You know Warhammer? The video game. The little miniatures. It's the miniatures and it's a computer game. There's Warhammer Dawn of War. I love art. Me and Jesse used to play RTS all the time. I was actually ranked globally 22 in Warcraft 3, 2 versus 2 random teams, to the point where if you're on the West Coast ladder, that's where the real men play. I'm sorry, I don't want to talk shit about East Coast or Europe, but like when I went to play East Coast or Europe, it always felt like JV League. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like maybe play behind one hand behind my back and play against people. West Coast was cracked. You know why it was cracked? Because at around 4 o'clock, 5 p.m. is when the Koreans came online, and they were the first in the 90s to make gaming a professional sport that you can make money off of. And they used to fill stadiums of kids watching top players like Slayer Boxer and things like that in the 90s play StarCraft. And these people were great, and they made money, but unfortunately, some of them, there's mandatory military service in South Korea. And so they would have to end their career to defend their country, which is fine, whatnot. So anyways, the Koreans still have that same ethos in the gaming world, and so all the Koreans log onto Warcraft 3, and then they would accept me to play with them because I got high enough, and they would call me Gosu like I was pro, and I had like some of my old replays on the websites are down, but they'd have my replay files on there of me playing with the Koreans, and it was like fantastic. And because I was an idiot, well, hindsight bias, I was like, there's no future in any of this. I should quit and go get a political science major. And like a few years later, RTS gaming became big, and becoming pro became big, and people were making good money. So anyways, I digress on all that and where I was going. But what would happen is we would get this guy who would come in through a girl, come in through an acquisition who was super good. And then I'd get this person who was like a Warhammer 40K psycher, who are these people who have like they have the telepathy skills and they're geniuses, but they're like demented because they're trying to prevent themselves from chaos coming in. And that's what like a senior engineer at Google is. Like he's like, my mind bears a great pain, because they're like just so smart and they're just cracked and they can do great things. And I have to sit and tell them like, look, I'm M&A, I'm a script kiddie, but just in this interview, just because this person can't just like do map reduce or understand perfectly different auditing tables in their mind, or code things from scratch and know how to do logarithms instantaneously and matrix multiplication like instantaneously, doesn't mean they're a bad engineer. We brought him in here because your VP knows that this product, if it gets into Google, is going to be fantastic. Can you more focus on their experience and what they've done and judge them on that? And within 2 interviews, we would know if the person was good or not and decide to hire them. And so to bring this all back to what I started with in the beginning, a lot of interviews is performative work. And another thing is we have main character syndrome. So someone who's really good in your audience might go deep into Google interviews and then not get the offer, but not think of, wait a minute, you crushed it, but there was 3 other people who were interviewing for the same job, and maybe the guy who got it over you had just 10 more years of experience, or maybe a girl who got it over you had less experience but was really good friends with people in the interview loop. Those are things you just can't control. And I think from your audience focusing on statistics, hopefully they don't fall. I mean, it's easy for them to see when other people fall prey to statistical mistakes of thinking that like the edge case represents the whole entire population. But when you're in the driver's seat and focusing on something that you want, all that logic goes out the street, and you focus more on like your own emotions. Like the whole saying of, if a lawyer defends himself, you have an idiot of a lawyer and also a fool of a client. And that's kind of something happens when it comes to statistics. Now, connecting it to people saying in their company, how do I augment myself with AI, and like what should I be doing? How do I get started? I think the first thing is learn Bayesian statistics, watch the show, see who he has on, and read about it. The people think that like to be an expert, you have to have a PhD in some topic or whatnot. No, to be an expert is you just need to know 1% more than the person you're talking to. It just, do I know a little bit more about this subject than you relative to this person in this room? Not, do I know relative to the world? No. Relative to the world, my knowledge of AI, maybe I'd say middle of the pack. Maybe. I'm not going to say top tier, but I'll say middle of the pack. But then if you get me in a group of HR people, I would say I'm probably higher in the pack. And then if you get me in a room of people who are PhDs in AI, I would say I'm a novice. So when it comes to your own company of whatever size it is, if you want to learn more about these tools and things like that, the first thing to do is stay up on the topic, read about what other people are doing, hear about stories, and then share those resources inside your company. And what starts happening is, this was happening at Salesforce. I was just a random HR guy, and before I knew it, I was talking to the presidents of the company and got mentioned, and my project got mentioned in one of our Wall Street quarterly calls. It all happened because I was just known as a guy in Slack who was like just sharing stories about AI all the time. And then even to engineers at Salesforce who are principal engineers who would then come to me and ask me questions. And I was just like, what's going on with this world right now? Like this age, I'm the M&A guy. You should be talking about tech. Or, no. Like, what are you saying about embeddings? And you said something about alignment and pre-train and post. I was like, I slept at a Holiday Inn Express. But that's also a sign of when a new, novel, important tech happens. It shakes up the social order, and I love that chaos because what it does is it jolts people, and what happens is some people put their head in the sand and they can't handle it. Some people reject it and fight it, and because those two groups are doing their drama, it then opens up the whole entire playing field, and there's less competition. So someone who's watching Learn Bayesian Statistics might hear a good podcast and say, oh, wait a minute, I just learned something valuable that I could use for an advantage to get my promotion and do better. So by you just being on top of it and sharing resources in your company, eventually people will start coming to you and looking at you as a thought leader. And just the fact that you might even not be able to answer their questions, but you might know someone who can in the organization, you get the reputation of, oh, this person gets stuff done. And you then get an aura of plus 10 get stuff done. And then you get aura of plus 20 where people are sharing, not only did you connect me with someone, I want to connect back with you that you helped me solve my problem. And this is what I learned about what happened. And this is with this technology, where it worked and where it didn't work. And then you're on your path of becoming an expert. And you go from there. I could go into very like, okay, you should probably go learn, like, read these papers here and don't use Pinecone as much anymore because it's not important. And you should be focusing on this aspect of ChatGPT agent. It's like, no. Everyone has their own unique quest they're on. It's more of where can you plug yourself in so you can get information flow coming to you so that you can use that information for your own unique benefit. So I'll end my sermon, and don't forget to like and subscribe Learning Bayesian Statistics with R, Python, and other awesome stuff. Okay, go ahead.
Let me show you how to be a good Bayesian.